You ever experience one of those moments where everything suddenly makes sense, like a puzzle snapping into place and the truth you've been avoiding slams into you like a freight train? Yeah, that happened to me. But let's rewind for a second. That Friday night was supposed to be nothing special. Earlier in the week, we'd argued something minor and stupid, but I thought we'd smooth things over. Apparently, I was wrong. Completely out of the blue, Jessica, who usually hated going out unless I was tagging along, casually announced she was heading to a party. The very one I told her I wasn't comfortable with. Now, I've never been the possessive type. We've always had this unspoken agreement: if something felt off, we'd talk it out. But this time was different. She stood in our kitchen, not even making eye contact, holding her car keys like the conversation was already over. "I'm going whether you're okay with it or not," she told me. It wasn't a suggestion, and she definitely wasn't asking for permission. Her words felt like background noise in a decision she'd already made. That was the first moment I felt a twinge of doubt. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was reading too much into things. Maybe she just needed some time to herself. But then I saw what she was wearing. Picture this: a tight, black dress, shorter than anything she'd worn in years, paired with high heels I didn't even remember she still owned. It was the kind of outfit you wear when you want to be noticed, not by just anyone, but by someone specific. And this clearly wasn't about catching up with her friend Stacy and that wild bunch she hangs out with. No, this felt like something completely different. I didn't say a word. She gave herself one last look in the mirror and smiled. Not a warm, happy smile, but the kind that never reaches the eyes, cold and distant. She didn't kiss me goodbye. Just tossed out a casual, "Don't wait up," and walked out. I spent the rest of that night pacing around the house like some kind of fool. Something deep inside me wouldn't let go, a heavy, anxious feeling that settled in my stomach like a stone. Still, I didn't reach out. No calls. No messages. If she wanted space, she could have it. I wasn't about to chase her. Around midnight, I found myself replaying our recent conversations over and over. Little things started standing out. Had she seemed more distant lately? Yeah, maybe. Less affectionate? Definitely. But the thing that really nagged at me was how smooth her stories had been. Too smooth. Like they were practiced. Rehearsed. There was always a ready-made answer for where she'd been or what she was doing, and now, thinking back, something didn't sit right. The silence around me got so loud I didn't even notice I was holding my breath. I picked up my phone, thumb hovering over her contact, but didn't press call. The clock showed 1:30 in the morning. No messages from her. No updates. Just silence. Then I did something I told myself I'd never do. I opened our shared phone account. I knew I was crossing a line, violating her privacy, but I couldn't help it. It took only a few taps. And then it was there. Clear as day. Dozens of calls and text messages to a number I didn't recognize. They started about a month ago and had only increased since then. And it wasn't just during the day. Some messages were sent well past midnight, times when I thought she was lying asleep beside me. My chest tightened. I felt sick. My heart was beating so fast I could hardly focus. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was work-related. Maybe just a friend. But deep down I already knew. That instinct, the one you try to silence, was screaming at me. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't deny what I saw. I didn't sleep. I just sat there in the dark, phone in hand, waiting. For what, I wasn't even sure. By the time the first rays of sunlight slipped through the blinds, I still hadn't heard from her. Not a single message. No explanation. No excuse for why she hadn't come home. I must have checked my phone 100 times, hoping for any kind of reason that could calm the storm inside me. But it stayed silent. Then, around 7:30 in the morning, I heard the sound of heels clicking against the front steps. I hadn't even realized I'd dozed off on the couch until the noise jolted me awake. The door creaked open, and there she was, Jessica. Her hair was slightly messy, makeup smudged, and she smelled like a blend of strong perfume and alcohol. She stood in the doorway like nothing was out of the ordinary, like she hadn't just ignored me the entire night. She looked at me and gave a lazy smile. "Good morning," she said, as if nothing had happened, as if her disappearing act wasn't tearing me apart inside. She didn't look guilty. She just strolled past me like I wasn't even there, like what she'd done didn't deserve acknowledgement. I sat up, glaring at her, and though my voice came out rougher than intended, I didn't care anymore. "Where were you all night?" She stopped, turned slowly, and met my eyes. But instead of the usual half-baked excuse or vague apology, she laughed. She actually laughed. "Are we seriously doing this right now? It's too early for your drama." Drama? That was the word she chose? I rose to my feet, struggling to keep the storm of frustration from boiling over. I had spent the entire night awake, waiting, no messages, no calls, nothing. And now she stood before me as if everything was perfectly normal. My voice trembled with restraint. I said, I waited up for you all night. You didn't even think to check in. And now you're acting like I'm the one making a scene. She responded with an exaggerated eye roll. I told you I was going to a party. I didn't realize I needed to update you every 5 minutes. We're adults, not kids. But it wasn't really about the party. It wasn't even about her being out until sunrise. What gnawed at me was the blatant disregard in her tone, the way she looked at me as though I was just an inconvenience. Frustration surged through me, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from helpless anger. I blurted out a question that had been brewing beneath the surface. Who is he? The words cut through the air like ice. I hadn't meant to ask it out loud, not like that, but it was too late to take it back. She paused, just for a heartbeat, but I noticed. That tiny delay, that flicker of hesitation before she turned away and waved her hand dismissively. You're being paranoid again. There's no other guy. Don't lie to me, Jessica, I said firmly. I looked at the phone bill. The silence that followed was suffocating. I hadn't planned to bring it up, but now the truth was out in the open, hanging between us like a weight neither of us wanted to claim. Her whole expression shifted. The smug smile faded, replaced with a sharp coldness in her stare. Her eyes narrowed as if I had somehow crossed a forbidden line. You checked the phone bill? Her voice was a chilling whisper. What's wrong with you? She twisted the situation so quickly it was almost impressive. In an instant, she made it seem as though I was the one who had done something wrong, like my concern was some kind of betrayal. But I wasn't going to let her turn the tables this time. I asked you, who is he? My voice cracked, louder now, desperate to cut through the wall she was building. With arms crossed and her gaze avoiding mine, she muttered, it's nobody. You're overreacting. Yet her tone had changed. The defiance was still there, but now it felt more rehearsed, like she was gauging whether she could still twist the story the way she always did. I took a step closer. You've been calling and texting someone almost every night for the past month. You disappear for hours, come home dressed like that, and now you expect me to believe there's nothing going on. This time, the mask cracked. Her jaw tightened, and for the first time, she turned to face me directly. It's none of your business, she snapped, each word gritted out between clenched teeth. You don't own me. And just like that, the truth slipped through, not said directly, but confirmed in the way she refused to deny it any longer. She didn't explain. She didn't try to deny it again. She just made it plain that how I felt didn't matter to her. That what we had wasn't worth defending. I stood frozen, staring at someone I thought I understood. There were no loud accusations, no dramatic scenes, no tears. Just the crushing realization that this person had changed, or worse, that she had always been this way and I was only now seeing it clearly. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the bedroom. I'm going to sleep, she said over her shoulder, like that wrapped everything up. Like nothing else needed to be said. But that wasn't true. Nothing about it was okay. She vanished into the bedroom and the door clicked shut behind her. The sound rang in my ears, echoing through the room, leaving behind a hollow stillness. It was as if something vital had been drained from the air. I remained there, paralyzed, struggling to wrap my head around what had just taken place. What hurt the most wasn't the silence, it was her complete disregard. She hadn't tried to justify herself, hadn't attempted to lessen the blow. She just walked away, like I was meaningless, like everything we'd built together didn't count. Sinking onto the couch, my thoughts spiraled. She had been talking to someone else for at least a month. While I was sleeping just a room away, she had been messaging another man. And when I finally confronted her, she didn't even blink. She looked right through me like I was invisible. How was I supposed to deal with that? My mind reeled, piecing together fragments of the past few weeks. The nights she came home late, always saying she was with Stacy. The sudden interest in going to the gym. The mysterious work dinners she never used to mention. The signs had been there, and I had ignored every one of them. Or maybe I hadn't wanted to believe. My phone buzzed in my pocket. For a second, I thought maybe it was her, maybe a message from the bedroom offering some sort of explanation or apology. But when I checked, it was just an alert from the phone plan app. My stomach dropped. I had forgotten to disable notifications for that one number, the one she kept calling. There was a new message. The timestamp was 7:48 in the morning. She hadn't even been home for 20 minutes and already she was talking to him again. Driven by something I couldn't name, I tapped the number, needing to know who he was. A name flashed on the screen, Mark. Not someone from work, not a family friend. Just Mark, a man I had never heard of, with a number I didn't recognize. My breath caught in my throat as I opened the call history. There had been 46 calls in the past 2 weeks. And more text messages than I could count. Late into the night, when she always claimed she was too exhausted to speak, the truth became undeniable. This wasn't just a suspicion or some irrational fear, it was reality. Jessica had been involved with someone else. I heard the faint sound of movement from the bedroom. The door creaked open and she appeared in the doorway, her expression calm, almost indifferent, as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. "Are you seriously still dwelling on this?" she asked, her voice devoid of emotion, nearly uninterested. I looked up from the phone in my hand, my voice low. "I know it's him. Mark, right? That's his name." For a moment, she didn't respond. Then, with a casual shrug, she said, "Yeah, so what?" Her tone was so matter-of-fact, as if she had just confessed to forgetting to take out the trash. "Yeah, so what?" That simple phrase broke something deep inside me. I wasn't even angry anymore, I had moved past that. The pain had turned into something colder. Something emptier. I felt nothing but a numbing chill in my chest. "How long?" I asked, my voice sounding as hollow as I felt. Jessica rolled her eyes in response, like the question itself was unnecessary. "I don't know. Maybe a few months." She leaned against the doorframe, completely unbothered. Does it really make a difference? I couldn't wrap my head around it. How could she act like it didn't matter? While my world was crumbling, she stood there as if I was being dramatic. I slowly got to my feet. "You've been seeing him for months, hiding it from me, sneaking around behind my back, and now you're asking if it matters?" She folded her arms and frowned slightly, visibly irritated. "I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you everything," she said, her voice sharp, like I was overreacting. "You've been so controlling lately, constantly on my case. I needed some space. And Mark, he gets it. He doesn't smother me the way you do." The words spun in my mind, controlling, suffocating. That's how she justified this betrayal? I let out a bitter laugh, empty of any real humor. "You needed space, so your solution was to turn to someone else? You cheated because I cared about what you were doing." Jessica tilted her head, her face bored, like the conversation no longer interested her. "Don't be dramatic. It didn't even happen until last week, if that's what you're so upset about." The way she said it, like it was just a minor detail, made my stomach twist. "Last week," I echoed, the words barely making sense in my head. My entire body felt like ice. "Yeah," she confirmed with a slight nod. "It just happened. And if you weren't being so dramatic, maybe you'd realize it's not as serious as you think. We've been drifting for a while. You know it." She spoke as if it were a simple truth, something I should have accepted long ago. I could hardly look at her. She didn't seem like the same person anymore. Maybe she never had been. I turned away and stared out the window, feeling like the walls were closing in. I couldn't stay in the same room with her any longer. "Leave," I said under my breath, the words barely audible. Jessica looked surprised, her eyes widening slightly. "What?" I said. "Leave," I repeated, louder this time as I turned to face her. "I don't care where you go. Just get out." For a brief second, it seemed like she might protest. But instead, she walked over to the counter, grabbed her purse, and slipped on her shoes as if she were heading out for errands. "Fine," she said, brushing past me toward the front door. "But don't expect me to come running back. You brought this on yourself." And with that, she walked out, slamming the door behind her. The silence that followed wasn't the same as before. This time, it carried a finality, a sense that something had been irreparably broken. The echo of the door reverberated through the house, lingering in the air like a reminder of what had just happened. I stood there, staring at the empty space she'd just left behind. It felt heavier without her than it ever did with her still here. The odd part was, after months of feeling like I was losing her, the emptiness she left behind felt even more suffocating. I don't even know how long I stayed there, frozen in place. My mind couldn't focus on anything except for a single thought that repeated endlessly. She's gone. She's really gone. And even then, I couldn't tell if I was shattered or relieved. Maybe it was both. I sank down onto the couch, my phone still in my trembling hand. Her name and marks still lit up the screen from recent calls, as if mocking the reality I just stepped into. How had everything spiraled this far? How did I not see it until now? I dropped the phone onto the coffee table and leaned back, staring blankly at the ceiling. My chest felt tight, not from crying because no tears came, but from the overwhelming sense of emptiness. It was as though my brain had shut down, refusing to process what had just unraveled. I wanted to be furious. I wanted to yell, smash something, anything to release the storm building inside me. But I did nothing. I just sat there, trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape. Thoughts began racing through my mind once more, replaying every single moment that had led me to this point. I kept thinking about the night we first met, how she walked into that bar with such a striking confidence that I couldn't look away. Back then, she seemed full of life, humorous, spontaneous, and authentic. At least that's how she appeared to me. But things had changed. It felt like I'd spent all this time living beside someone I no longer recognized. Someone who had become a complete stranger without me realizing it. And then there was Mark. A name I had never heard before. A man I'd never met, who somehow had become more significant to her than I ever was. Strangely, the worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself. It was the sheer indifference she showed. She didn't bother covering it up. When I asked about him, she just shrugged. Like it didn't matter. Like I didn't matter. Maybe I should have known this was coming. Deep inside, perhaps I always suspected it. But I chose to believe we were different, that our bond was unbreakable. I thought I could handle anything. I was wrong. Jessica had been slowly drifting away for months, and I had either been too oblivious to notice or too unwilling to admit the truth. The final conversations we shared began to loop in my head like a cruel montage. All those times I asked if something was bothering her, and she just brushed it off. The evenings she got home late, offering vague explanations. The nights in bed when she turned away, claiming exhaustion. I could sense her slipping, a little more each time. But I stayed silent, not wanting to come off as insecure or suspicious. And now it was done. She was gone. And I was left alone in a house that suddenly felt colder and emptier than I ever imagined. Her absence was no longer temporary. She wasn't coming back. This wasn't a simple argument that could be patched up with a few promises. It was the final chapter of us. And deep down, I understood there was no salvaging what we had. Not after what had been said. Not after what had been done. A sudden wave of clarity hit me like ice water. The reality was undeniable. Jessica hadn't just stumbled her way into this situation. She had chosen it. She had decided that Mark, this stranger to me, was more valuable than everything we'd created together. The look in her eyes, void of emotion, said it all. She wasn't filled with guilt or regret. She had made her peace with this a long time ago. I had just been the last one to realize it. I couldn't say how long I sat in that stillness before finally standing up. I needed motion, something to keep me from spiraling deeper into my thoughts. My body moved before my mind caught up. I grabbed a garbage bag from the kitchen and began going through the house, collecting any trace of her presence. Her clothes, cosmetics, that ridiculous scarf she bought and never used, even the perfume that now churned my stomach. It all had to go. Every item tossed into the bag felt like a tiny step forward, a quiet act of reclaiming space that no longer belonged to her. But the photographs were the toughest. One stood out, an old snapshot from our first getaway together. We were grinning at the beach, full of hope, like nothing could touch us. I stared at it for what felt like ages before finally tearing it apart. We weren't those people anymore. She had changed, and so had I. I kept going until there was nothing left. The silence afterward was almost too loud. The rooms echoed with an unfamiliar emptiness, each corner more lifeless than the last. But at least she wasn't here. I didn't have to keep pretending. I didn't have to force a smile or hold on to false hope. I could finally stop pretending everything could be fixed. Sitting back down, drained, a new thought crept in: what now? I hadn't even begun to consider the next step. It felt like the foundation of my life had been ripped out and I was still tumbling through the void, uncertain when or where I'd land. But one thing was certain: I wasn't going to sit around hoping she'd come back with apologies and regret. She'd made her decision, and I wasn't going to be anyone's second choice anymore. She may have believed she could leave me broken, but I refused to give her that victory. I had no clear plan ahead. Maybe divorce was the next chapter. Confronting Mark crossed my mind, but what would that accomplish? Would I really gain anything from asking him why he stepped into my life and shattered it? Probably not. I needed to look beyond the pain, to find a way forward, to figure out how to rebuild something new out of the ruins. Answers were still far off, but one thing was becoming more apparent: this marked the beginning of the end for Jessica and me. And for the first time, I started to think that might not be such a terrible thing after all. The house remained unsettlingly still. Each object, each beam of light, seemed too defined in her absence. Her departure had stripped away the warmth, leaving everything strangely hollow. I thought I might feel a sense of relief with her gone. Instead, I found myself suspended in a space between denial and the heavy weight of truth. The home that once held our laughter, our disagreements, our shared dreams, now felt foreign, as if it belonged to someone else entirely. I leaned back into the couch, my eyes falling to the trash bag filled with her belongings resting near my feet. A deep breath escaped me, slow, and waited. There was nothing left to distract me from the truth. It's unsettling how someone can share your space, your bed, your meals, and your life for years only for them to become a stranger in a heartbeat. All those shared dreams, the promises whispered in quiet moments, were wiped away in an instant. One name, Mark, was all it took to dismantle everything we had. The silence around me felt suffocating. My thoughts were too loud, too chaotic to handle alone. I had to talk to someone. I reached for my phone and called my closest friend, Eric. He picked up after the second ring, his voice groggy but laced with concern. "Hey man, what's going on? Are you okay?" His words were heavy with worry, despite being barely awake. I rarely called this early unless something was truly wrong. I hesitated, unsure how to even begin. "Eric, she's gone." There was a pause. A long one. "Gone? Wait, what do you mean, gone? Like, actually gone?" "She's been seeing someone else. A guy named Mark. It's been happening for a while. She told me this morning like it was just another conversation. Then she left." I could feel my voice beginning to shift, the shock giving way to something sharper, angrier. Eric let out a soft, stunned exhale. "Man, I don't even know what to say. That's awful." "Yeah? Well, sorry doesn't fix any of it," I replied, my voice cracking under the strain of hours of bottled-up emotion. "She didn't even care, Eric. No real explanation. It's like I never meant anything to her. I can't believe this. She always seemed so into you." "Sure, things felt tense lately, but I never thought she'd cross that line," he said, his disbelief sincere but doing little to help. "Well, she did. And now she's out of my life," I said, a bitter laugh slipping from me. The room felt even emptier after that. Eric stayed quiet for a beat before asking, "So, what now?" That question hit hard. What now? I hadn't allowed myself to think past this morning. Everything felt frozen in that one awful moment. "I don't know. Divorce, probably. I mean, what else is there? I'm not exactly going to forget this ever happened." "Are you absolutely sure about that?" Eric's tone turned cautious. "I'm not saying you should forgive her, but maybe there's something more going on. Have you two actually sat down and talked it through?" My jaw clenched. It was taking all I had not to explode. "Talk? There's nothing left to say. She lied. For months. She betrayed me. How do you come back from that?" "I get it." "I do," Eric said softly. "People mess up. In ways that are hard to fix. But that doesn't always mean things have to end if you're still willing to fight for it." His words stung. I knew he meant well, but the thought of even entertaining forgiveness made me sick. I'm not going to stand around hoping she picks me over him. She made her decision. Eric let out a long sigh, probably sensing it was best not to press any further. "Okay. Just don't do anything impulsive. Let yourself breathe. Think it through." I didn't reply. What could I say? I felt hollow, like the foundation of my life had crumbled beneath me. After a few more strained words, I ended the call and dropped my phone on the couch. That's when something caught my attention. Her laptop. It was sitting on the kitchen counter, half open. The screen was dark, but the sight of it made my pulse quicken. I didn't want to dig through her things. I already felt guilty for going through the phone bill, but something inside whispered that there was more I hadn't seen. My hands trembled as I approached. I flipped the screen open. The laptop hummed to life. No password. She never bothered with digital security. That thought stung. It felt like one final slap in the face. As if she had been so certain I'd never dare to look deeper. So sure I'd be too afraid of what I'd find. I opened the browser and went straight to her email. I wasn't proud of it. At that point, though, pride seemed like a luxury I couldn't afford. I needed to see the full picture. I didn't have to search long. There he was, Mark. A long string of emails stretched over several weeks. Flirty exchanges. Casual notes filled with private jokes I didn't recognize. Like they shared some inside world that shut me out. And then I found the one message that undid me. The subject line read, "Last weekend was amazing." Dread curled in my gut as I clicked on it. The contents were plain but devastating. They'd arranged to meet at a hotel. She wrote about how great it had been. There was even a picture of them together, smiling, happy. She looked so radiant in that photo, brighter than she had in months. And it wasn't a fleeting mistake. This was something planned. They were arranging more weekends, talking about future trips. My vision blurred and I had to grip the counter to keep from collapsing. It was never just a slip-up. This had been intentional and it had been going on for a long time. She had been actively shaping a new life with another man, all while living under the same roof with me, still wearing the mask of my wife. I couldn't bear to see any more. I slammed the laptop shut, heart pounding. The sting of betrayal cut far deeper than I had imagined. This wasn't merely a case of physical infidelity. It went much further. She had detached emotionally from our marriage long before I ever caught on. And the most crushing part? She showed no remorse. She had left me stranded in the shadows, leading a double life without so much as a flicker of guilt. A surge of anger washed over me, but this time, it was tangled with a deep, aching sorrow. She had made a choice, him over me, over everything we had built together. And now I was left alone to sift through the wreckage. My gaze stayed locked on the closed laptop, my thoughts spiraling in 1,000 directions, none offering any comfort. I could sense the gravity of the next move pressing hard against my chest, but no path seemed right. For the first time in my life, I truly grasped what people meant by the point of no return, and I had just crossed it. I don't know how long I stood there, fixated on the shut laptop like it might explode at any moment. The image of Jessica with Mark burned into my mind, sharper than any blade. She wasn't just involved with someone else. She was glowing with happiness. The way she looked at him, it was the way she once used to look at me, eyes lit up, smile full of warmth. That version of her, the version I hadn't seen in so long, hadn't vanished. She had simply saved it for another man. The realization was like ice in my veins. The shock melted into a hollow, bitter numbness. Without even thinking, I grabbed my jacket from the chair and headed for the door. I couldn't remain in that house, not with all the echoes of her still lingering in every corner. I needed air, space, anything to keep me from being pulled under by the tidal wave of emotion. My feet carried me down the street aimlessly, the destination irrelevant. I just needed to move. The cool air brushed against my face, but it couldn't clear the chaos in my mind. Each step felt like a departure from my old life and a plunge into something unfamiliar and uncertain. But one truth rang loud and clear. There was no turning back now. I pulled my phone from my pocket and stared at it like it belonged to someone else. A part of me wanted to call her, confront her, shout, demand some sort of explanation. But why? She had already revealed everything without saying a word. Her actions had spoken loudly, her decision was final, and I wasn't part of it. Instead, my finger moved through my contacts until it stopped on a name I hadn't touched in years. My attorney. Just seeing the name made my stomach drop. Divorce. A word that sounded cold and clinical, yet now it was about to become my reality. I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the call button. Dialing that number meant no more illusions, no more telling myself this might be temporary. Fixable. Then I thought about the messages, the hotel bookings, the future plans she had made, with Mark, not with me. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. She had been planning a life that no longer included me. The fire of anger returned, more intense this time, and I pressed the call button before I could change my mind. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Hey Greg, it's been a while. What's going on?" Just hearing my lawyer's voice made everything feel that much more final. Still, I forced myself to respond. "David, I need your help. It's about Jessica. I want to file for divorce." There was a brief silence on the other end before he spoke again. "I'm really sorry to hear that. Are you completely sure? This isn't a decision to make lightly." "I'm sure," I replied, trying to sound more composed than I actually felt. "She's been seeing someone else for months. I found out this morning. There's nothing left to fix." David didn't question me further. "Okay, let's meet at my office tomorrow and go through the next steps. I'll need some details from you, so we can begin the process." "Tomorrow is fine," I said, and quickly ended the call before the weight of what I had just set in motion could truly settle in. Standing there on the sidewalk, I clutched the phone tightly, torn between a strange relief and overwhelming sorrow. I had just taken the first step toward ending our marriage. I didn't know whether I should feel empowered for finally doing something or broken for letting go of 7 years of shared memories. I kept walking, the streets quiet, my thoughts in chaos. Images of Jessica floated through my mind like unwanted ghosts. I remembered the day we moved into our house, picking out paint swatches together, playfully arguing over whether the living room should be painted blue or green. I thought about our first Christmas, how we spent hours trying to untangle lights, laughing hysterically when half of them wouldn't even turn on. Felt like another lifetime, yet it wasn't. It was the same Jessica, the same home, before the lies, before Mark came into the picture. Eventually, I found myself in a small park not too far from where we lived. The wooden bench let out a soft groan beneath me as I settled onto it, my eyes fixed on the playground just across the way. A little girl was giggling joyfully as she glided back and forth on a swing, her father giving her gentle pushes. His face lit up with the purest kind of happiness. For a fleeting moment, I found myself wondering about the reality of that man's life. Was he truly content? Or was he, like me, teetering on the brink of something unforeseen? That thought gripped my chest with a quiet ache. There was a time I had been like him, hopeful, sure of my path, thinking I had all the answers. Jessica and I used to be content, even excited about our shared plans for the future. But somewhere along the way, those dreams had unraveled, long before today. I simply hadn't noticed how far off course we had drifted until everything came crashing down. Sitting on that bench, a heavy realization washed over me. The woman I had once loved was no longer the same person who had just exited my life. Jessica had transformed into someone I could barely recognize. Maybe the change had been happening gradually, and I had chosen not to see it. Or maybe I had stayed the same while she kept evolving. Either way, it was clear now we had become two very different individuals, moving in completely separate directions. Time slipped by unnoticed. As the sun dipped lower, casting elongated shadows across the park, I remained motionless, lacking the motivation to return to a place that no longer felt familiar. The word home felt empty. Sure, the structure still had 4 walls, a roof, and all my belongings, but it no longer carried the warmth or promise it once did. It was just a shell now, missing the life I thought would grow within it. Eventually, I forced myself to stand and begin the slow journey back. As I reached the front steps, something caught my attention. The trash bag filled with Jessica's belongings still rested by the door where I had left it. I picked it up. Oddly enough, the weight gave me a sense of closure. This wasn't just refuse. It was the final chapter of a life she had chosen to abandon. Without hesitation, I carried the bag to the large trash bin outside and dropped it in. The lid slammed shut with a definitive thud, a sound that echoed with meaning in the quiet evening air. It marked the first small step forward. I had no illusions that this single act would untangle the mess she'd left behind. The days, weeks, and months ahead were still uncertain. But for the first time, I felt like I had reclaimed a piece of control, however minor. The future was wide open now, a blank canvas that both frightened and freed me. One thing was crystal clear. I was finished being the fallback in Jessica's narrative. My life mattered too, and I wasn't going to let her decisions dictate the course of it any longer. The following morning felt almost unreal, as if I had stepped into someone else's world. I'd slept in our bed, though now it felt more hollow than ever. The silence pressed in from every corner, no sound of her moving through the house, no rhythmic clinking of dishes being put away. Just me, lying still, eyes locked on the ceiling, thoughts looping endlessly through everything that had transpired. There was no way back. The decision was made. Divorce wasn't some abstract fear anymore, it was a tangible, fast-approaching reality. Dragging myself out of bed, I felt like gravity had doubled its hold on me. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, and for a moment, hope flickered. Maybe it was her. But when I checked, it was only Eric. A short message, "You okay?" I stared at it, not sure how to respond. Was I okay? I honestly didn't know what that meant anymore. I finally sent a vague, "I'll be fine," and tossed the phone onto the bed. I forced myself into the routine of the day: coffee, a hot shower, getting dressed. Every action felt automatic, like checking items off a mental list just to distract myself. But it was impossible not to be reminded of her at every turn. The way she used to sing completely off-key while making breakfast. The pile of shoes she always left by the door, despite promising to put them away later. I wasn't ready to face the outside world, but I had to. Today was the beginning of the legal process. I needed to meet with David, my attorney, and start what felt like dismantling the life Jessica and I had constructed together. I slipped on my jacket and stepped outside, purposely avoiding a glance at the trash bin holding her discarded remnants. The drive to David's office felt endless, the silence in the car mirroring the quiet inside me. When I finally parked, I paused, eyes fixed on the building in front of me. What I was about to do hit me with full force, undo everything we had built, piece by piece. Inside, David greeted me with a calm professionalism, the kind worn by someone who had walked countless people through this process. He didn't ask how I felt, and I silently appreciated that. We sat down in his modest office, stacks of paperwork spread across the desk, bathed in the harsh glow of fluorescent lighting. It made everything feel stark and unforgiving. "All right, let's begin with the basics," David said, his tone neutral but efficient. "You've been married for 7 years. No children, correct?" I gave a small nod, my throat tightening. 7 years. It sounded both like a blink and a lifetime. "Any shared assets?" "A house, vehicles, savings?" he asked, pen poised above the paperwork. I forced myself to swallow, trying to shift my thoughts away from the emotional storm and onto the practical, legal matters. The house, we both had our names on the mortgage. No children, so that part was clear. We had a joint bank account, though most of our money was kept separately. In a way, it was a straightforward situation. David nodded as he scribbled down notes. "That simplifies things," he said. "Given the situation, we can move through the process rather quickly. Are you considering an uncontested divorce? If Jessica is willing, we can avoid a prolonged court battle." The concept of an uncontested divorce felt too sterile, too detached, especially considering the emotional turmoil beneath it all. It made me feel sick inside. But what choice did I really have? There was no point in fighting for something Jessica had already let go of. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Uncontested. I just want this to be over." David's expression softened as he looked at me. "I understand. It's the fastest way to move forward." Move forward. The words echoed in my mind, sounding empty and unreachable. How could I possibly move on when every inch of my life still held her presence? After finishing up, I signed the initial documents and shook David's hand. "I'll file this today," he assured me. "You'll probably hear from her lawyer soon, but don't worry, we've got it under control." I gave him a small nod, thanked him, and stepped out of the office feeling even more depleted than I had when I arrived. The legal process was in motion, but emotionally the damage was only beginning to unfold. Back in my car, I sat in silence, my eyes fixed on the steering wheel, trying to grasp what I had just set in motion. This was it, the official beginning of the end of my marriage. But instead of a sense of closure, I felt like a piece of me had been torn away and handed off to be processed like paperwork. I started driving without a destination in mind, letting the roads decide where to take me. Eventually, they led me somewhere I never imagined I'd go: Stacy's house. The same Stacy Jessica had always claimed to be with on those nights she was actually with Mark. Some unexplainable urge for truth had pushed me to her doorstep. I knocked twice, my heart thumping loudly in my chest. When Stacy opened the door and saw me, her eyes widened in shock. "Oh, hey Greg. What are you doing here?" I didn't bother with small talk. "I need answers. How long have you known about Mark?" A flicker of guilt crossed her face, but she masked it quickly with an awkward smile. "Greg, I don't know what you're talking." My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I couldn't help it. "Please don't lie. You've been helping her cover this up, haven't you? Every time she claimed to be with you, she was with him. How long has this been going on, Stacy?" She looked down, biting her lip, hesitating before the truth slipped out. "A few months, maybe longer. I can't say for sure." Even though I had suspected it, hearing the confirmation felt like a punch to the gut. "And you never thought to tell me? Not once? You just stood by and let her lie to me again and again." Stacy shifted uncomfortably, her voice dropping. "Look, Greg, it wasn't my place. Jess is my friend. I didn't want to get caught up in whatever was happening between you two." I stared at her, incredulous. "That's your excuse? That you didn't want to get involved?" "You were involved. You helped her lie to me." Her eyes flashed defensively as she snapped back. "I'm sorry, okay? I didn't know what to do. Jess was unhappy. I didn't think it was my role to ruin things for either of you." As if Jessica hadn't already done that herself. I shook my head, filled with disappointment. "Thanks for nothing, Stacy." I turned around and walked away before she could say another word, leaving her speechless on the doorstep. My heart raced and my hands were clenched tight. The truth was out now, but it didn't bring clarity or peace. It only deepened the emptiness. Jessica's betrayal wasn't the only one. Others had known and stayed silent. They had let me live in a lie, saying nothing while everything I believed in fell apart. As I drove away from Stacy's place, it hit me I wasn't going to look for answers anymore. I had found them all, and none of them made the pain any easier. All that remained was figuring out how to gather the broken pieces and start a life without her. And for the first time since this nightmare had begun, I finally knew where to begin. By the time I returned home, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the front lawn. Everything seemed changed. Maybe it felt lighter, or maybe I was just finally numb. That kind of numbness that smooths out the sharp edges of pain like a fog settling in. I stepped through the front door and closed it gently behind me, letting the quietness embrace me. It wasn't the oppressive silence I'd grown used to, it was the kind that follows when a final decision has been made. The pain of Jessica's betrayal, Stacy's involvement, and the looming divorce hadn't vanished, but now it felt like a weight I was beginning to comprehend. It no longer crushed me the way it once did. I stepped into the living room and looked at the exact spot where Jessica had stood earlier that day, her expression blank, distant. Her presence still clung to that space like a shadow, but the sting had dulled. I was done chasing after ghosts, done trying to find meaning where none existed. My phone buzzed in my pocket again. I hesitated, assuming it was just another hollow message or a vague attempt at comfort from someone who didn't really understand. But when I glanced at the screen, a name stopped me: Jessica. Her message was simple: "Can we talk?" Reading her words, a mix of feelings surged through me: anger, confusion, maybe even a trace of curiosity. A part of me wanted to toss the phone across the room and shut her out, just as she had done to me for months. But there was another part, a quieter voice inside, that believed some conversations were necessary. Not for reconciliation, but for closure. I needed to hear her out, if only to finally close this painful chapter. I didn't reply. Instead, I grabbed my keys and got in the car. I had a good guess where she might be, either at Mark's place or hiding out somewhere else. But if she really wanted to talk, she could meet me where things had first started unraveling. The drive wasn't long. Soon, I was parked outside the coffee shop where Jessica and I had shared our first meaningful date. The irony was harsh: this place marked both the beginning and the end. Somehow it felt appropriate, like completing a circle. It wasn't long before her car appeared. She stepped out slowly, glancing around with uncertainty until her eyes met mine through the glass. She entered the cafe cautiously, her face pale and unsure. I couldn't tell what she was hoping for: forgiveness, understanding, or maybe just a chance to explain. Whatever it was, I wasn't ready to offer it. She sat down across from me, eyes searching mine, and finally spoke, her voice lower than it had been in months. "Greg, I'm sorry." I didn't respond right away. I stayed quiet, waiting. Sorry, it wasn't enough. It never had been. She sighed, fingers combing through her hair as she began again. "I know I messed up. I know I caused you pain. I never wanted things to spiral like this." Her words felt scripted, as if she had rehearsed them over and over. They rang hollow, lacking real weight. "You never wanted it to go this far?" I asked, my voice steady but cold. "Jessica, this wasn't a mistake. You lied to me. You were unfaithful for months, and you stopped even pretending to hide it. You stopped trying altogether." She looked down, unable to meet my gaze. Guilt flickered in her expression. "It wasn't supposed to turn out like this. Mark, it wasn't serious at the beginning. I didn't even fully realize what I was doing. I felt stuck, Greg. Disconnected from everything. From you. And there it was, the excuse I knew was coming." Her explanation meant to tie it all together neatly. But nothing she could say would justify what had already happened. "Disconnected?" I repeated, numb. "So instead of talking to me, you turned to someone else? You couldn't even bring yourself to tell me how you felt?" Jessica finally looked up, desperation in her eyes. "I didn't know how. You've been distant too, Greg. We both have. It's like we were living side by side, not together, even before Mark entered the picture. I thought maybe if I did something just for me, I could find clarity." Her words struck a nerve, not because they were true, but because they confirmed what I'd been avoiding. She wasn't sorry for the damage, she was sorry because she had been caught. I leaned in, locking eyes with her. "You didn't do this because of distance, Jessica. You did it because you made a choice. You wanted something different. And instead of fighting for what we had, you let it all fall apart." She winced but didn't argue. She couldn't. The truth was out, and we both saw it clearly. "I came here thinking maybe we could talk," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Maybe we could figure something out." "Figure something out?" I echoed, disbelief in my tone. "Jessica, there's nothing left to fix. You ended our marriage. I've already filed for divorce." Her face turned ghostly pale, and for the first time real fear appeared in her expression. "Divorce?" "Yes," I replied with quiet certainty. "Divorce. This is the end, Jessica. You made your decision. Now I've made mine." She stared at me, her lips parting as though to protest, to offer a last-minute plea that might change everything. But there was nothing left to say. She had chosen her path and now she had to walk it alone. The silence between us became unbearable, thick with finality. Her eyes were glassy but not a single tear fell. She wasn't crying because she had lost me. She wept, overwhelmed by the shock that I had been the one to leave first. After what seemed like endless minutes, she slowly rose to her feet. Her voice trembled as she murmured that she never wanted things to end this way. I gave a small nod and stood as well. I felt the same. This wasn't how I envisioned our final moment. Yet, this was our reality. Without another glance, she turned around and quietly walked out of the coffee shop, vanishing into the darkness beyond the glass door. I stayed behind, watching her silhouette fade into the night, a strange yet calming sense of finality settling within me. This was truly the conclusion of our story. For the first time in many months, I could finally exhale without feeling the heaviness in my chest. The pain, the deception, the fury, they were all still lingering, but they no longer held me hostage. I had reclaimed my sense of self, and although the journey ahead would likely be challenging, at least it was a path I could call my own. As I stepped outside into the crisp evening air, a realization struck me with surprising clarity. This wasn't just about parting ways with Jessica. It was about rediscovering who I was beneath all the hurt. That more than anything else mattered the most. Because in the end, the one person I truly needed to forgive wasn't her, it was myself, for allowing her to take so much from me for such a long time. And now finally I was free.